Hello there!
Hi guys, been a long time.
Yes,
we've been freezing our nuts off.
Before we start though, Bob, we learnt a new chord today, Bob, didn't we? We learned which is a F major 9 sharp 11.
When he says we take that liberally. I mean, it takes me about a week to get my fingers there, as you've just seen. With the sharp 11.
And you can play a really cool.
Which, if my ears don't deceive me, might be Lydian.
It's a F Lydian mode. There you go.
Hell's teeth. I mean, they're honestly making leaps and bounds here.
So today, Bob, we've got two really cool guitars, haven't we?
Yeah, we've got a couple of Firebirds. Slightly different twist. Regulars have seen this one before. This is my historic reissue 2012 Firebird 1. Single pickup, 2 knobs, no malarkey.
But changed to Steinberger.
Yeah.
Changed, taken out the banjo tuners.
Taken out the banjo tuners.
Because Bob hates banjo.
Well, I know I like banjo.
Yeah.
And I like the banjo tuners. They're really cool and really retro. You can see them on this one. The only trouble is they weigh a ton. They give the guitar neck dive. They're not very accurate. They're a bit. Sorry if I'm offending the Firebird tuner fans here. And also they stick out the back, and so if you drop the guitar over, you've got more to hit and more to hook onto a cymbal on stage or something. Because these things kind of get you out of jail. They're very accurate, and you can fit them, and they're not they're a reversible mod. Is what I'm trying to say.
Think about this. So what first of all, what have you got there?
Right, this is Ramon's latest squeeze, and it's very, very sexy too. This is an ESP Firebird 5 from about 1995. 95. And it's a really nice guitar. First of all, it feels like a Firebird 5 should. You know, like an old Firebird 5. It's got the right thickness, and just when you pick it up, just the general feel of the finish and all the rest of it is definitely not very modern. It's really nicely made. All the proportions are completely accurate. Plays like a dream. Nice big frets. But whereas this one has got a neck the size of your thigh, this one has got a neck the size of your little finger. It's wide enough, but it's really slim. It's really slim. These couldn't be more different.
They're kind of like at the end. I mean, I'd like something in the middle, but they're both great guitars, you know, in their own right. This is actually very lightweight, but bear in mind it's got less stuff going on. But you can tell that this is a very light piece of mahogany. Very light. Yeah. Whereas this one is a bit heavy. This is just over £8.
So I'm told the story about this one was that this is one of 100 guitars custom commissioned by Dave's Guitars in Wisconsin from Gibson's factory, and apparently he wanted a run of convincing modern Firebirds. So he ordered a bunch which include 1s, 3s, 5s and 7s. Not sure about any custom colours or so on, but this is one of the Firebird ones that came out of that shipment, and it used to belong to a rockstar friend of mine who's still got the other one. Interestingly, you know, every guitar is different.
He's a great smashing guitarist, amazing guitarist, isn't he?
Amazing guitar player. And
he's got a great voice on this.
Great voice. And
can we say his name?
No, not today. I don't think so. But and he's played with lots of big names around the world for years. He knows what he's doing. Anyway, he had 2 of these and he wanted to sell one, so he sold it to me. I've never come across a situation where 2 guitars were so identical, right? You know, if you give me 2 of any other guitar, you'll like one more than the other. I couldn't tell the difference.
They were cut from the same tree, made at the same time.
Well, more than that, it's just unbelievable. So the only difference is that mine has got a knot in the wood just there. Right, that's the only way you can tell the difference. I could not tell the difference.
Wow.
Anyway.
And actually, that's a piece of. Is there a piece of walnut? Are these strips walnut?
I think they're strips of walnut interleaved with the mahogany.
Yeah,
that's right. I mean, they're really beautifully made, through necks. But this is exactly the same manufacturer. It's not too good to look at the back. It's much more clear on the front.
Yeah.
Also, the colour of this is much more like a real old Firebird.
Wow.
That's much more modern.
Right. Yeah, it's lighter, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, the old Firebirds, they're really quite dark, like violins.
Yeah. I mean, also what we were talking about is a lot of people tend to not like playing the bird, and I think that the reason Bob and I like that is because Bob first guitar was an SG. I found out
first proper guitar,
and with an SG you're playing a little bit to the left compared to a Les Paul and a Strat.
Does Sir dress to the left?
Well, and And so that makes a big difference with an SG. It's just slightly to the left. So when you do actually play a Firebird, it's not so alien as some people that play a Firebird think they're playing over here. You know?
I think the other thing is we're playing sitting down, right? Yeah. It's actually more pronounced. When you're standing up, the guitars definitely goes over to the left. Yeah. And for some people, they find it really disconcerting. The guitar's like way off to their left. It doesn't bother me at all.
And it's a very comfortable guitar because you have got this little groove here.
Comfort cut, yeah.
Which is, probably copied from a Stratocaster, right?
I guess, yeah.
So, and in a sense, this was, Gibson's copy of a Strat.
Well,
in a few ways.
This was, Gibson commissioned that bloke, Ray Dietrich, who was a car designer, to come up with a new design, because basically they were getting the living hell beaten out of them by these upstart Fender chaps, who had the Telecaster, the Stratocaster, then the Jazzmaster, the Jaguar, and all the custom colours were coming out and all the rest of it. And Gibson were all of a sudden, although the guitars were fabulous, they were seen as a bit stuffy and a bit stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
And so these guitars were the first guitars that came out in a wide variety of custom colours, which of course, if you find an early mid-60s Firebird in a custom colour now, you better have a big wallet.
They're expensive.
They are way expensive because they're so rare,
And then they came out, and apparently they came out with all the custom colours, so that you could get ones in gold, or the DuPont colours or something. There was about, 8 or whatever colours there were.
They had I might try and put it on the Supers. There's a great website where you can look at what the DuPont car colour of the time was. Because remember, this is early days of the space race, and Californian sunshine and post-war prosperity and all that stuff. And so, everyone was driving around your cars with big fins in pale blue and stuff like that, And so they both Fender and Gibson ponced all the DuPont custom car colours. And there's a chart which actually says, okay, they used to call this on a Cadillac, but on a Fender it's called foam green, and on a Firebird it's nearest equivalent, Inverness, whatever. And it's quite interesting. But those custom colours both on Fenders and particularly on Firebirds, because Firebirds were really expensive. They broke really easily. They're huge to transport. They don't stand up on stage. They fall over. I mean, they didn't really sell very well.
But to go through the different models, this is obviously a Firebird 1. It had one pickup, no binding, pretty, and it was
it's a junior.
Yeah, it's a junior, and whereas that's a Firebird 5. So if you wanted to show this one, you can see the difference here. We've got the crowns, we've got the binding, 2 pickups, and
so imagine that this is the range is like a Les Paul range. Okay, so that's the junior. Okay, the Firebird 3 was a bit like the special.
With the dots.
2 pickups, still dots on the neck.
Yeah.
Okay, not much in the way of...
But binding, I think it did have binding. It had binding,
I think it might have done.
Yeah, it had binding.
The 5, which I'm holding, albeit an ESP, this was like the Les Paul standard or gold top or sunburst. And then the 7, 3 pickups, same switching, was like a Les Paul custom. 3 pickups, gold.
Ebony board.
Yeah. And also the original 7s had the very low frets, like a Les Paul custom. Which means that they're amazing guitars until you pick them up and play them, and then it's like standing on ice. You're sliding around all over the place.
Basically,
so everyone refrets them.
Yeah, but that's what Brian Jones, of course, had the Firebird 7, and Keith Richards. Johnny Winter had the Firebird 5.
Yeah.
And then we had Alan Collins. I think he had a Firebird 3, but he certainly had Firebird 1s.
With the little short vibrato.
Yeah. Short vibrato, and then another great Firebird 3 player, which nobody really knows, is a great Motown guitarist. And he was called Chunk Ellis, and he played on all the Motown hits. So a lot of the time when you're listening to all those Motown songs, you're listening to a Firebird. That's crazy.
And of course, one of the reasons is these guitars, they're well known for their pickups, which are mini humbuckers with no screw tops, and they're wound slightly differently to the Epiphone style mini humbuckers, or what came up on deluxe.
So they're 2 coils, are they?
They're 2 coils,
right.
But they were designed to be really light. Again, this is a fight back against Fender. They're designed to be sharp, and they are really bright. So whereas most Gibson players tend to play with their tone controls pretty much on full throttle most of the time, unless they're doing woman tone. Whereas Firebird players, for example, this one is actually marked up by my friend.
So if I play like, and that's really shrill.
It's bitey. It's really bitey.
So if I put it on which?
Well, he for his preference, I've kept his
Oh,
marking.
yeah.
He had it marked on 3. The tone.
Yeah, that's much better.
And if you play that through a bit of drive, that's a sweet sound.
Yeah. That makes a lot more sense, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then Firebird 1, of course, which is kind of like the Firebird 1, and this is not just Bob, I've got another couple of friends who say this as well, but they said that when Eric Clapton in Cream played Firebird 1, it was his best tone ever. And that's what Bob's...
I think so. There's a short bit of bootleg recording, probably done on some cassette machine in the field, of a concert in America. It could have been Dallas in 1968. And it's just the introduction to Sitting on Top of the World.
Yeah.
And Clapton's playing it through the usual Marshall. It's clearly a Firebird 1 that he's playing.
Which he would have bought on tour, right?
And which he had at that particular time.
He probably bought it in a shop on tour.
And the tone and the playing and the phrasing is about as good as electric guitar playing has ever got for me. It's unbelievably good. The recording is bad, and there's even a little stitch in the middle, which means there's a glitch between the second and third verse or something. Right. It lasts about 2.5 minutes. It's fantastic. Look it up on, or I might put the
put the link in.
Put the link in. It's. Oh, I mean, maybe I'm just kidding myself. I don't know, but for me, it's amongst the greatest pieces of electric guitar playing ever witnessed.
And so he played like the cheapest version of the Firebird and made it sing. So it's kind of there were 4 models in total of the whole sort of family.
There were, and then of course that was between 63 and 65. Yeah, late 63. By the middle of 65, the Firebird wasn't really doing too well. Also, it's the construction of it. It's easier to see on that one, but. It's I forget. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 11 pieces of wood stuck together. The 2 wings, which are incidentally joined on the diagonal. They're not just stuck on flat to flat. They're joined in a diagonal chunk. But then the centerpiece contains mahogany. Well, there are thin layers of mahogany stripe around mahogany all the way through. So this was an assembly nightmare. The headstock leans back, which means you had to carve it from a piece of wood 3 times as deep. So the manufacture of these guitars was expensive. So and Gibson weren't selling enough, so they changed the design of the Firebird in '65 to this is known as the reverse Firebird because it leans back away from the player. They changed it to the non-reverse, which leans forward more like a Strat or a Jazzmaster or a regular guitar. And at the same time, they became, they weren't through necks, they were glued on necks.
And the headstock went the other way.
The headstock, it did.
It went the other way, and they had machine heads.
And they had Clusen machine heads with plastic buttons, and the 2 lower guitars, the 1 and the 3 had P90s, and the 5 and the 7 had
these pickups.
Still mini humbuckers. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And a lot less people play them. Noel Gallagher likes them from Oasis.
And of course, Traffic.
Steve Winwood played and probably still plays a green one. Original green. So that's a rare guitar because of the colour. Yeah. And he makes a wonderful sound. By the way, if you watch Winwood and Clapton playing together, as I have a few times, you think, well, Steve Winwood's the singer and the keyboard player, and Clapton's the guitarist. Yeah. Listen to how much of Steve Winwood's playing is in Clapton's. I think Steve Winwood influenced Clapton's musical thinking when they were young, both young, I'm sure of it.
With Blind Faith?
No, much earlier, when they were knocking around the London circuit. Right. Remember, Steve Winwood was a prodigy, he was in Spencer Davis at 16 or 17, right? I'm sure that's the case. When you hear them, keep on running, keep on hiding. Oh, one fine day I'm gonna be make you understand. Oh yeah. Anyway, if you listen to them soloing, you know, in the last 15 years I'm talking about, when they do one of the Blind Faith songs, ends up with both of them soloing, and not even in turn, but right over each other. And it's amazing. The only way that they can do that is because their soloing is so similar.
And they're just used to each other's playing.
And they're so used to each other. And it's a real eye opener when you see them play it live.
Yeah.
And there's no room for studio trickery and conspiracy. God, it's good.
Yeah.
And you realise how good a guitarist Winwood is. And you listen to Clapton and you go, Winwood isn't playing Clapton licks. Clapton's playing Winwood licks. But he's been playing those licks ever since I started listening to him as a boy.
Well, everyone admired back then. You know, this is when I'm researching the history videos. Everyone just admired Steve Winwood for his voice and musicianship. But he, you know, they were just like, he could just get that soulful sound that he's singing.
Fantastic.
That, you know, obviously everyone else struggled with, you know.
And whereas the rest of us gradually age, he still looks fantastic. He's in his 70s now and he looks fantastic.
It's like Paul Jones, you know Paul Jones?
Yeah.
You know, he's like drinking some
contentious
elixir.
comment. Paul has got a God on his side.
That's true, yeah.
Paul is quite devout.
I like Paul.
He's a lovely man.
Yeah,
lovely man.
He's a good chap.
Yeah. And he's still out there touring with Marcus, our friend Marcus Cliff.
Yes.
Out there with the Manfreds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they work hard.
Yeah.
They've just finished I think they've finished a tour. They've done all kinds of venues all over the country.
And he's amazing. I mean, one of my highlights of my career was playing with Paul Jones at the Medieval Studios, Radio 2.
Right.
And we did one of his own songs. He played on two of my songs, and then I did one of his songs. And he said to me, he goes, "Do you know who the last person who played on that song?" And I said, "Who?" He goes, "Eric Clapton." And he's recorded it, you know, with Eric Clapton. And I was like,
"Oh, nice.
Thank you, Paul Jones."
Nice.
So, but he's amazing. My mum used to have a poster of him on her bedroom wall. That's true. Absolutely true.
Woof, woof. So anyway, while we're on the video, we haven't done one of these for a while. What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? Not a lot, really. Basically, what have oh yeah, I'm working on an album, a new album.
Right.
Which is called...
Your album?
My album.
Some of which bits I've heard.
Yeah, you've heard.
And which I've really, really been impressed by.
Oh, thank you very much. And it's called The Explorer.
Oh. I wonder why that is.
Well...
Something to do with a pointy guitar.
You can hazard a guess, maybe. But no, it's called The Explorer for two reasons. Number one is because I actually found a Navigator ESP Explorer, an old guitar from Japan, which was left in a Tokyo bar and got, you know, smoke on it, and it took me a week to cover off, take out the nicotine. And then I started writing songs on that guitar, you know. And then some of those songs are on this album, and they kind of explore different styles, because my father was from South America. And I used to go to, in Buenos Aires, when I used to live there, I used to go to cumbia when I was like 14, 15, cumbia gigs, you know, concerts. So some of it is influenced by South American music, Latin music, some of it with my explorations into African music. And so I thought, yeah, I've got this old guitar called the Explorer. So that's why the album is called The Explorer.
When they built the Explorer, they never dreamt that it was going to be used for anything, you know, like it is.
So that's kind of what I've been working on. How about you, Bob?
So I've been trying to join as many bands as I can, so I can try and get some gigs. And I've had a few gigs. I sat in with Ramon and Dr. Ika.
He's amazing.
About a month ago, and they played an amazing set, and they let me mess up their set for about 3 or 4 numbers, which was fantastic fun.
Bob played better than me. He gave me a run for my money.
By the by, I played through Ramon's amp, and which is identical to one of mine. In fact, the one he's playing through this evening. Yeah. And I'd never played through my amp at gigging volumes. So
then let's explain.
And it sounded fantastic.
So let's explain. Basically, because Dumbles, God rest his soul, passed away. And there's this really cool podcast called Guitar Wank.
Guitar Wank? I've never heard of it.
Haven't you?
No.
It's called Guitar Wank.
Wow.
Guys, if anyone, you probably know it anyway, but if you don't know it, check out Guitar Wank.
I really can't tell if he's being serious.
No, I am. It's called Guitar Wank. In the comments, they're going to tell you it's true.
Cool.
If they get this far. And anyway, on Guitar Wank, I love saying it. I hope...
Is that Guitar Wank?
Yeah.
Wank. Right, okay. Yeah. So on Guitar Wank...
No, you mentioned Guitar Wank. So this podcast, Guitar Wank, they interviewed 6 or 7 people who had known Dumble really well. And they kind of... Because, you know, when Dumble was alive, people didn't want to tell, you know, the truth about him. You know, good.
Well, I thought he was some kind of weird hermit in the middle of the desert. So to find 6 or 7 people that had even met him is pretty exceptional.
No, he was a lovely guy. He had a lot of good friends. He was a really nice chap, you know. Which I always kind of got the vibe that he was. That's why when I made some videos about Dumble, and I always spoke well about him because I knew he was a good guy. That's the vibe I got. And anyway, cut long story short, I've been listening. I listened to all of these like 6-7 hours when I was doing some work. You know, Robin Ford was on there as well, talking about his experience with Dumble.
Right. Yeah.
And anyway, so Dumble unfortunately passed away. He was a really interesting character, and the technology that he invented to build these amps. I know they were based on Dumble, Fender, and RCA circuits from way back, because Fender just went into the RCA book of circuits, you know.
Yeah.
So they all got it from the RCA scientists. But anyway, Dumble, whatever technology he improved on, he says, when I die, Dumble will die. So you've got all these guys like Kerry Tone, which we have a great amp here by Kerry Tone, who's a really cool guy. And then you've got Fuchs, Andy Fuchs, which there's a hilarious story about Andy Fuchs, because he bought Dumble.com. Okay, guys, let me, so to save you having to wade through 7 hours of interviews on Guitar Wank podcast, I'm going to tell you 2 great stories, yeah. First one is, there's a guy called Henderson, who plays in Tribal Tech.
Scott Henderson.
Scott Henderson.
Right.
Thank you. Scott Henderson. Anyway, the first story is Dumble asked Scott Henderson to write a letter to Andy Fuchs requesting that he gives up the Dumble.com name back to Dumble. And there was a back and forth of quite aggressive letters. Eventually, Scott Henderson and Andy Fuchs apparently have become good friends since then. But at the time, Andy was like saying, you know, I'm not going to give up Dumble.com. But however, he did eventually did refrain from doing a Dumble.com website.
Right.
And so it was okay. So then Scott Henderson goes back to Dumble, because apparently Dumble got Robin Ford, Larry Carlton, Eric Johnson, all these stars to write to Andy Fuchs. But anyway, so Scott Henderson goes back to Dumble and says, look, the name Dumble.com is coming up for sale. You can buy it. It's free. It costs $100. And Dumble replied to Scott Henderson, after asking all these famous guitarists to write a letter, he says, nah, I can't bother with that shit. Who cares? I'm not paying $100. And Scott Henderson was like, wait a minute, you've asked me to write a letter to embarrass myself talking to Andy Fuchs, getting everyone else involved, and you can't even be bothered to spend $100.
$100.
So that was kind of like Dumble in a nutshell, you know.
But you know, back in the day, that would have been kind of around the turn of the millennium, so around 2000 or 2005, because there was a huge business back in those days of people opportunistically buying domain names for things like Aston Martin or Bell's Whiskey.
Well, they still do it now. They still do it now.
Right. And then basically holding the real owners to ransom and say, well, okay, you might own the brand, but I own the domain name. How much do you want to pay me for?
Yeah, well, no. There's tech companies in Bangalore, in India, and all these places where what they do is they it's legitimate. It's not illegal. You just go and check who hasn't renewed their domain name and how much it's worth,
and snap it up,
and then really sell it. And it's legitimate. You can't, you know, it's just the way business works. So anyway, the second story is even funnier. This is about John Mayer and Joe Bonamassa. And Howard Dumble didn't care for either of those two.
Oh.
He didn't like either of them.
Really?
No, he didn't. And the reason why...
Because they both like his product a lot.
Absolutely.
But hey.
So first of all, John Mayer, Dumble thought he was just a bit of a dick. And just a way, because he phoned up Dumble and kind of demanded that Dumble did some mods on his amps. And I think just the way he talked to Dumble, Dumble didn't care for him at all. So refused to help him and didn't want to know anything about him, didn't want his name mentioned. Also, John Mayer got involved with 2 Rock, and that's a whole other story. But I love Bill Crenard as a friend and an amp tech guy, so I've only got good words for 2 Rock and Bill Crenard. Secondly,
I finally played a 2 Rock that I liked.
Well, if it's Bill Crenard, it's going to be amazing.
Because I haven't been crazy about them, but my friend Mike has got the Matt Schofield 50 watt signature.
Yeah, I think Bill Crenard did that one. Yeah,
and it's only clean.
Right. Yeah.
So you know, if you want to hammer it and get some drive, you're going to have to belt the front end with something.
Yeah.
But it's the clean. It's bloody great amp. Really huge sounding. expensive,
Yeah.
transparent quality, all the right overtones. It's really nice.
Bill Grenard's involved, it's going to be incredible because I played 2 of his film sounds and my favourite.
Yeah, he's modified or built your film.
He kind of rebuilt them almost, you know. I mean, and did an amazing job. You know, Bill Grenard is a man as far as I'm concerned.
And
he's my Dumble.
Film sounds, by the way, are basically converted 50s and 60s home movie projectors.
Yes, yeah, but
with an amplification system on board that has turned out to be one of the great circuits for low wattage guitar.
Absolutely, right. And because I have 2 kind of Dumbles. I have Tommy. We both have Tommy. He's Dumble in
Tommy
Sweden.
Cougar, Mystic Blues.
And we have Bill Grenard. So the second story was about Joe Bonamassa, and Joe Bonamassa, he's a lovely guy. I really like Joe Bonamassa.
I respect the hell out of him.
I don't really care for John Mayer. I think he's a bit of a dick. I'm on Dumble's, view that John Mayer's a bit of a dick. But as far as Joe Bonamassa goes, I think he's a really cool guy. But what happened was, the story goes, Joe Bonamassa went into Guitar Center and was kind of like throwing around the name 2 Rock or something and going, and he had an entourage with him, and Dumble was in Guitar Center. Or it was in some shop, I think it was in Guitar Center. It was in some shop in the USA. And Dumble's playing a guitar. And kind of Joe Bonamassa walks in and kind of barges everyone out of the way and grabs a guitar, and it's all about the Joe Bonamassa show, Which, fair enough, he's a larger-than-life character. He's a very cool guy, respect. But of course, Howard Dumble's like, who the hell is this guy? And anyway, and then really funny, Joe Bonamassa started saying, so what are all these Dumble amps? Started talking about Dumble amps, not knowing that Dumble was actually in the shop. And then started mentioning 2 Rock. Yeah, I played 2 Rock, they're pretty good. And instantly when he said that, he's killed any relationship he could ever have with Dumble.
Really?
Dumble would never speak to him again.
Oh.
And also the way that he kind of went into the guitar shop and kind of pushed everyone out. Not pushed, physically, but kind of, took up all the airspace.
But is that on good authority or not? Because the one thing you have to worry about with
No.
all these stories, there's always some side to it, isn't there? And
there was a witness in the shop when it happened. There was actually a witness there. If you listen to
the guitar wank.
What did I just say?
He just said guitar wank.
I said
no, I said it. I said it.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't just say if you listen to wank. I said, sorry, if you listen to Guitar Wank podcast, I'm telling you, this is me. This is
okay.
This is me.
Okay.
This is the goose man telling you.
Mind you, I mean, look,
legit, man.
So the net of it is that Howard Dumble is unfortunately no longer with us. Right.
God bless his soul. He's a genius guy.
John Mayer is out there playing all kinds of different amps, including I've met his steel string singer. It's a big amp. Right. Met that.
Eric Clapton loves him.
Right. Of course, he's modified Clapton's. What are they? Are they? They're not Basemans there.
No, he's got a 2 Fender.
Tremoluxes or something.
Yeah, what he was doing towards the end of his career. Again, you can hear all this on the Guitar Wank podcast. Dumble was making no longer the overdrive special amps, which now Bob is going to show you a photo right now. Okay, and we're going to come to our mystics in a minute. But cut long story short, Dumble was stopped making the overdrive special because it's a complicated circuit. It's got relays. It's got a channel switching system. It's complicated to build. It takes a long time. So he priced that I think about $40,000 or $50,000. If you wanted to buy an ODS off him, you're going to have to pay $50,000 or something. So he didn't really want to make them. Even then, it'd probably take 4 years to make it. So what he was doing is he was phoning. He had a contact in Guitar Center who's actually interviewed on the Guitar Wank, and that contact would get him like a Fender amp, like a Fender reissued deluxe, or a Fender or a Vibroverb or whatever. And so people would go. He'd get that amp, like in the case of Clapton, I think they were Basemans. I can't remember what they were. You watch my guitar history on his amps and you'll find out. And then Clapton actually went to his ranch where he was living in a ranch and actually met him, and they actually met a couple of times, Clapton and Dumble, and that's what he did. He completely took everything out of the amp, so just the chassis was left, and then he rebuilt the amp with old parts, old cool parts, and that's what he did towards the latter end of his career. He no longer built the overdrive special because they were complicated and more difficult to build.
Well, and the word is that our friend in Sweden who built our overdrive special amps.
Well, let's come back to Tommy. Yeah, let's tell quickly the story. Sorry, I'm hogging today, but I want to tell you that the Dumbles story, the Clone Wars started. There were 2 amp makers, yeah. Before Andy Fuchs, before anyone, this is what I have known. There was a guy called Bill Crenard, who's my hero, my man.
Who was the founder of Two Rock?
He's the founder of Two Rock. He was the first.
But subsequently, he's not in Two Rock anymore, is he?
No, but there were two guys together. There was Bill Crenard and there was another guy. I can't remember his name because they were called K and K. Bill Crenard and somebody else.
Okay.
And they were Two Rock amps. And they were working apparently in some farm or wherever they had a factory unit there. And the other guy was Tommy Cougar in Sweden. So that was happening. That was the first. This is before Andy Fuchs, before any other cloners of Dumble. There were 2 guys. There was Tommy Cougar in Sweden and there was Bill Crenard in America. And they were the 2 guys. And Tommy Cougar could have even started before Bill Crenard. Because Tommy did really early on Dumble clones. Overdrive special clones, you know. So Bob and I, the way we met, and I've actually met a few friends now from, I call it the Mystic Club, because Tommy Cougar in Sweden built these amps, and my friend Paul from the north of England, great, lovely guy, introduced me to these amps. So I got hold of 2 of them, and then I got a phone call from a rather posh fellow from London, and he said,
well, by that time I had my Carrier tone,
right,
which is amazing and cost very little, and I really liked these amps. And then somebody had approached me wanting to sell me a couple of these Mystics, and I was kind of the mind to say yes. I mean, they were expensive, but it was a good deal. 2 Mystics and 1 Catulator, which is the outboard effects loop thing you need. And so I thought, okay, I'll drop that money on them, and I'll basically buy both, and then I'll decide which amp I like better, and I'll let the other one go, and I'll kind of halve my outlay, and I can afford it. But before I did it, I was looking up, and about this time I'd come across Ramon, his videos and his recordings and stuff, and I noticed that he played the Mystics, as does Philip Sace. And really, between you and me and Sace, and I'm not saying I'm a well-known guitarist,
you're
well-known for this channel, yeah. And they're the only well-known guitar players I know who play these Mystics at all. They're really, really obscure, but they're incredible amps. So I phoned him up and said, look, I'm about to drop some money on these things. You play them, what's the deal? And that's how we met and became friendly.
I can't even remember what I told you in that phone call. Did I say they were good?
Oh, you said they were fantastic.
Right.
And then you directed me to that video you made early on, which went completely viral because you were probably, well, the world thought you were one of the first people to get the Dumble tone out of a non-Dumble. That's what that was all about.
Yeah. It probably there was one particular song that I recorded, and it really did nail that tone.
So Tommy, I've never met him. I've done a bit of email with him. He seems pretty nice, but he seems pretty reclusive too.
He's very similar to Dumble in a lot of respects.
I mean, and whether that's because he is who he is, or whether he's almost modelling himself on it, who can tell?
He's not. I mean, he's not like Dumble in every way, but there's a few kind of qualities of Dumble's character that Tommy kind of shares with him. Like, for example, Tommy is quite a spiritual guy. You know, he's quite a, sort of into the. You know, I'm what you call spiritual. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, I think. And he is kind of that way inclined. And
he lives quite remotely.
Yeah, I think. Well, maybe he lives on the. I think he in Sweden. He lives. I think. I won't say where, but he lives in a rural. Maybe in between a rural and a.
Okay.
Because
I mean, Sweden is not a very densely populated place anyway.
No. We're the land of the midnight sun.
And that. But he builds these fabulous amps.
Oh,
built. I mean, he's
still building now part time, but without a doubt, his amps are on the level of. I think they're on the level of Dumble. Maybe not quite as famous or as well known, but I think some of his work is outstanding.
Of course, the other rider we have to say is that each of these amps, starting with Dumble, they're all different. Dumble built amps for the player, so they're dramatically different, his amps. Yeah. And similarly, so Ramon and I are lucky enough to have 2 of these Mystics each, and I've got the Carrier tone as well. So we've got 5 overdrive specials between us. And when we sit down and listen to these amps, each of them has got its own
absolutely.
It's and they're quite different. They're all kind of groping for the same thing. That fabulous, spacious, clean, and that wonderful, blooming, transparent, clean overdrive.
Which you'll never get from a pedal.
No mush.
You'll never get. I mean, I know because I make pedals myself. You can't. You can get some similar qualities, you know, and some of my pedals have achieved that. But I think basically there's some things that you can't, because you've got a lot of power, haven't you? You've got the wattage on the from the valves, and that's hard to replicate in a pedal without having.
I mean, pedals. And some of the pedals made nowadays are really bloody good. Yours included. And,
thank you.
And they are a great way of getting down close to that sound with, let's say, a 10 or 15 or 20 watt amp, which means the sound engineer isn't going to shout at you, right? They're great for doing that. Absolutely great. But if you then really get yourself into a position where you can say, okay, now let's forget the constraints and let's just compare them in an open field.
Yeah.
An amp for me still wins almost every time.
Absolutely.
But you're going to get it in the neck, because I mean, you know, my small ODS is a 50 and it's incredibly loud. The other two are 100 watt amps. And where can you go with a 100 watt amp these days?
Yeah, it's
in a land of Kempers.
Yeah, I mean, generally that's why I've kind of. I mean, but it's nice to have. You know, it's nice to have a large 100 watts, and I think that's why Dumble was generally doing lower wattage amps. He was doing deluxes and vibroverbs and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Towards the end of his career, because you know they were being used more. You know?
Well, and that's the way the world turned. Having said that, the other thing about these amps is that there's a whole load of mystique. I'm not going to dwell on it, but I mentioned this outboard effects loop with an overdrive special amp because of the way the place that the effects loop sits is after the master volume, right? So it's way back in the circuit, and what it means is the return and send loop is too hot for outboard devices, in simple terms. So you need this step down device called a dumbulator or a catulator or a C-lator or what's the Bludo? A Bludolator.
Yeah, I had two of them. I had two of them, sold them both.
And this thing, and it has a tube in it, so it's like its own preamp, and it basically dumbs down the signal coming out of the amp, so it can go into effects like reverbs and echoes and so on, and then it retrieves that signal and puts it back into the amp.
Now the thing is,
what it does two things. First of all, its users swear that it adds a certain sweetness to the sound.
Yeah,
they're probably right. But
it's an extra gain. It's like an extra gain state.
But the brilliant thing is that it acts as a master volume after the master volume, and what it means is that you can get your tone coming out the amp the way you want it, and then you can turn it down. So it's not going to be bedroom quiet, but it's not going to piss the sound engineer off.
But here's the thing, Bob, is that same thing with Trainwreck. Ken Fisher's philosophy was keeping a very simple, pure circuit.
Yeah.
And so much the same, Dumble, you know, has said at the time that if you do put the effects loop as circuitry inside the amplifier, like a lot of these clones have, you're going to lose the Dumble sound.
You're going to lose the clarity.
Yeah.
The absolute top end high fineness.
Yeah. So it's having those two pieces of kit separate and having it very simple and pure makes the whole ODS experience better.
Okay.
But you know, the jury's out whether people can hear it, because I think like a lot of people prefer to have an effects loop at the back of the amp.
Well, it's so much more convenient. I mean, you are okay. So you and I have both got these amps. We've both got these dumbulators or catulators in our case, right?
Yeah.
When you played the gig the other night and I sat in, you had your 100 watt head, you had your 1x12 Altec speaker, you had your dumbulator, you had your guitar, you had your effects pedal. So you were travelling heavy. When I go out and do a big gig, I'll take all this gear because I know it's going to sound bloody fantastic. But at the same time, as you know from previous videos, I'm obsessive with going out with tiny rigs.
Yeah.
When I go to unknown clubs, like my little Excelsior amp, which I can get in one hand, my Boss MS3 pedal board, which is the size of a biscuit, and one guitar over my back, and I can walk in one journey to the venue.
Yeah.
Not piss anybody off with taking up too much space.
I think if you're jumping on a tube to going into London, but if I've got the car, then and I can travel.
Take nice gear, and it sounded the other night it sounded wonderful.
Thanks. I mean, there's a speaker that I like. It's called an Altec Lansing, and I use that for historical reasons because Dumble, first of all, he used the Altecs and then he used JBLs, and then he ended up on EVs. And then later, towards the end of his career, if you would have asked him, what are the best speakers? He would always say Celestians. So I think I may soon go to Celestians and ditch the Altec, because the Altec, it sometimes can sound a bit cold, and you really need to push it in order to get.
Well, one thing we should do is, and we can do it in your room or my room, is because I've got EVs, I've got different kinds of Celestians, a couple of Eminences, and EVs old and new, and you've got your Altec. And the great thing is, because they're all in cabs, we can actually plug them all in, and we can say, you know, okay.
I think we should do that.
You know, and certainly, I mean, one of my
do it for the Bob Ramon.
One of my trusty 633 amps, made by Cliff Brown. So when he supplied it with an Eminence Red Governor speaker.
Eminence are great,
but not an expensive speaker, probably 90 quid. You know, whereas I mean, a Celestian Blue or a Celestian Gold is going to cost top £200 easy.
Man, I think Eminence are such a good speaker. I mean, my favourites now are probably the Celestian. I think they're just kicking it out of the park.
I tend to agree with that,
but Eminence are great.
But what's interesting is that 633, he'd voiced it for the Eminence.
Well, can I say this?
So I can play it through all the other speakers, and it sounds bloody great. But when I play it through the Eminence, it sounds like, no, now I'm home.
Yeah, because generally, like, with vintage, we want vintage pickups, we want vintage guitars, we want vintage amps. But you should have new speakers, fresh speakers, because there's nothing worse than an old Jensen from the 50s, which is sucking your tone because it's so old and knackered in. I don't think speakers, this is my philosophy, I don't think speakers age as well as other bits of gear.
No, well, they are mechanical, and if they've been hammered, they get really screwed. But I mean, I do think at the same time, if you do get a new speaker, the boring bit is the first few weeks when you're playing it, and it's just sounds either a bit too stiff or a bit too sharp.
Yeah.
And you go, oh God, I've wasted my money, and you just go, no, just.
Well, it's like that. It's like when I got my Mystic Blues, what I did is I put Stevie Wonder. I just played Stevie Wonder's greatest hits through it for about 3 days, all day long.
Just work it up,
break it in.
But they sound great. They sound great.
So that's kind of like the kind of Dumble legacy, and a lot of what you hear on the forums is kind of jealousy because people don't own the Dumble and they're angry that they couldn't, or that they didn't get an amp built. And he did have a bit of notoriety for not delivering amps on time and sometimes not even delivering an amp.
Yeah.
But he was just a very eccentric person.
But in the affordable space, I mean, we've mentioned them twice already. What Nick Shazam, Nick of Carriotone in Malaysia, right? So he's producing clones of most famous amplifier models: Marshall JTM 45s,
pedals as well,
Dumbles, now pedals as well. Yeah. His clone.
He's very good.
It's really very good indeed.
Very good.
And he's producing these out in Malaysia very affordably, right? Now there is because everyone's discovered them. I got lucky when I found out about Carriotone. They were a small business and undiscovered. Now everyone's discovered them and discovered their products are fantastic and are very, very good value. And so they've got this humongous waiting list. But still, if you were a youngish player and interested in getting involved in this space, right? And you can sit there and you can dream about getting a Dumble for £100,000, and you'll be dreaming when you die,
Absolutely.
Right? Or you can put your name down for a Carriotone Overdrive Special, and in a year, for still a significant amount of money, but not bone-crushing amounts, you'll have one of the best amps that has ever been built.
Or if failing that, you can get a VHT. Have you seen those VHT ones?
Oh God, yeah. I've never played one. Are they good? Have you played one?
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying they're a great amp, but I think they're a good solid. I think
they are cheap. They're 750 quid, aren't they?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, this is one of the reasons.
Which for one of these amps, by the way, it's a lot of money. I know. I'm not spunking other people's money here. Because I know it's a lot of money, but for this kind of level of stuff, for decent tube amps, that is not a lot of money.
No, and like Tommy Cougar hasn't made a Mystic Blues amp for a long time. And I think I don't want to talk about Tommy, but what I will say is that the lower end of the market now, the cheaper end of the market is now discovering Dumble style amps, and this is where it's going to be really fun, is because you're going to get all these cheaper Dumble style amplifiers.
But then that road divides really quickly. That road forks into two. Okay, into the people who give a damn about what they're making, right? First and foremost, and trying to make good stuff for as little as possible. And so far, the VHT amp seems to fall on that side of the fence.
Yeah, I think
and the other side, where it's like, aye, let's make some money. And those amps are probably going to be comedy amps by our standards.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But let's wait and see. Good luck to all of them.
Yeah.
And if they can bring the price down on these things whilst maintaining the tone first,
Yeah.
reliability second, it's it'll be a golden age.
I think the amps, the clones themselves may eventually become desirable. I think the ones that are always going to keep their money are going to be old two rocks that were built by Bill Quinard.
Yeah.
And again, the Mystic Blues built by Tommy Cougar. You know, just because those two
there is one difference. As somebody invested in the Tommy Cougars and not the Two Rocks. Two Rocks are now very well known. Mystics are still really, they're a private joke between you and me and a few people we know. They're very obscure.
But I think those two are the original. In my opinion, and I know you've got all these other ones, Fuchs. You know, are very, very good amps, and I really like.
You got your Blue Nose and your Brown Notes and your Van Wieldens and all that stuff.
But they all came later. Fuchs was kind of more an earlier producer of this gear, but I think the two for me really are Bill Quinard and Tommy Cougar. Those two were the two guys that came up with the original. So
anyway,
people would pay these high prices.
Enough of that. We've been off to Dumbles. We've done the Firebirds. I think all that remains is for us to wish you. We haven't got our Christmas hats on today, but it is coming up. It's middle of December. Christmas is coming. It's been damn cold in UK. It's going to warm up next week. I fell over, by the way, in the street the other day. That my feet went straight out from underneath me, landed flat on my back, winded myself. Thank God I didn't hit my head. Because if I'd hit my head as hard as I hit my back, I'd be Humpty Dumpty now. I'd be split and all over the floor. Horrible. Anyway, I strained my neck because my neck pulled my head up from getting crashed. And so
the only thing I'd say is it was lucky you weren't carrying a Firebird at the time.
It was very lucky because the one thing wrong with Firebirds is that they are brittle. This thing up here, specifically here, breaks like a twig. That's why there's so many old Firebirds with a snap, even more than old, juniors and specials that used to break down here by the neck joint. But Firebirds are absolutely famous. The headstock comes off like a biscuit. They are. So even though we haven't got Christmas hats on, I think we should wish you all a very, very happy Christmas and a very successful 2023, and hopefully a 23 where we're not all incarcerated by some dreadful disease again, and we can get back to some kind of living lives and so on. So best wishes for now and for the future to all of you from me and from me.
Take care. God
Cheers.
bless.
Bye.